Hi, this is Mary from the Daily Sew. Knowing how to do some basic alterations is going to save you some money. Not only will you not have to pay somebody else to do the alteration, you can now wear the garment that you've already bought. One of the basic alterations that you'll likely need is taking something in. This is an easy technique that can be applied to a lot of different types of garments. Now this video is going to focus on a casual shirt. But like I said, you can use this for a dress shirt, a dress, a vest, a jacket, and all the sleeve variations that come with them, plus some skirt and pant styles. So with a little simple pinning and sewing, you're going to be able to get the fit you want and wear your garment. So if you're ready, let's go. So have the person put the shirt on. Keep it untucked, but otherwise as they plan to wear it. So buttoned if they liked it buttoned and over a t-shirt or not. Make sure they can see themselves in a mirror. Ask the wearer how they want the shirt to fit, feel, or look. Then take a good look and assess how big the shirt is and where it is too big. This shirt is too wide all over, but I can only take it in at the side seams. So I start by pinching out the sides evenly so the center line of buttons or snaps stays centered and it's not leaning to one side or the other. This gives me a quick idea of how much I'll be taking in and if I can take it in that much without the shirt becoming strange looking. With straight pins at the ready, start pinching the side seam evenly under the arm so that the front and back are equally pinched out. Place the pins pointing down to the floor. Where the pins go is where you will sew the new seam. Pinch and pin to create a smooth line. Repin and adjust where you need to. Typically, the new seam line will gradually come off the old seam line at the start, and it will gradually join back up on the seam line when you're done. But if the shirt is really wide for the wearer, you may have to start in a bit from that seam line, and you may never rejoin it. Keep in mind that if you pin out too much, the shirt becomes overfitted and it will restrict the wearer's movements and comfort. I place a couple of pins from the front and then a couple of pins from the back, and I'm always checking that the shirt is not being pulled too far over to the side that I'm pinning and that the line looks smooth. So after pinning the side, ask the wearer what they think. How do they think it looks? How does it feel? If you pinched out any excess right under the arm, you're also going to need to pinch out a little of the sleeve too to make a smooth new seam line. Check how the garment fits. Look for the fabric pulling in odd directions. This will tell you some adjustments are still needed. Here I pinned too much out of the sleeve, which raised the armhole too much. Have the person put their arms forward as if driving and other positions to be certain the new fit allows for these movements. I decided not to pin the left side of the shirt, but later I'll transfer the amount I took in on the right side to the left side. I'm still not happy with the drag lines in the upper chest. When a shirt fits properly, the shoulder seam will lay on the little divot of the shoulder joint, not hang off. So you can see when I raise the shoulder seam that all those lines go away. This shirt is too large all over, and I only narrowed it below the arms, leaving it still too wide in the shoulders and upper chest. To fix this, I would take in the shoulder sleeve seam, but that's a lot of work, and at that point I would probably advise the owner to start over with a smaller shirt instead of doing all that. And while we had the mirror and pins out, we went ahead and pinned a second shirt. Because this is a very quick process that once you have down, you'll be able to complete fairly quickly and confidently. By the way, the same method is used for a long sleeve shirt as well. At your work surface, measure and write down where the pins are on the shirt. Because remember, where the pin is placed is where you're going to stitch. So you want to know where you place the pins before you take them out. Take more measurements than you think, especially where they are forming a curve. Attend to use the pin heads or where the pin becomes visible as a point for measuring down the seam. And I use a down arrow for how far down I've measured and a sideways arrow for how far in I've measured. After writing down where the pins are, you can remove them. Flip the shirt inside out and lay it so that the side seam is directly on the edge. You may need to iron the shirt to get this seam flat. And because I'm taking width out all the way down, I have to let the hem out here just a little on both sides of the seam to get that side seam to lay nice and flat. You won't have to do this if you have no pins down at the hem. And now it's time to transfer our measurements back to the shirt. So what if you have a French seam, and that is a seam where it's not serged, but the seam allowance is folded double? Well, believe it or not, it is easier to unpick it. And then you would have it all unpicked, and you can see it now lays nice and flat. This is my seam line right here. So after you unpick it all, the seam, then you can see where the stitches are, where the seam line is, and now you have a reference point for measuring over the measurements that you got from where the pins are. You now would measure over from the seam line, just like if the seam was originally just serged. And then when you're done, you don't have to reproduce this seam at all. You could just sew it, and you could overlock the new seam allowances. So remember, you are measuring in from the seam line, which is the stitches, not from the edge of the fabric. Usually I measure down and over at the same time and place a pin, but this time I had so many reference points, I decided to mark all the downs and then measure over and mark the fabric with chalk. After all the measurements are marked on your shirt, you'll connect the marks to make a nice, smooth, natural looking line. I find the use of a curved ruler or a French curve invaluable, but of course you could freehand it. I move the ruler about until I find the best line, and then I flip it over to get the other half of the curve. My line isn't hitting every mark, but it hits most of the marks, and the marks it misses are very close to it. And then I have to repeat for the sleeve seam. Once the new seam line is marked, pin the 2 layers so they don't shift and sew down the marked line before the chalk wears off. Then we will transfer the new seam line to the other side. I sewed the right side, and now I'm going to transfer this new seam line to the left side. To do that, I line up the sewn side over the unsewn side. I had so much chalk on the first side it transferred itself, but that's not how I'm going to do this. So line up the seam allowances and the seam under the arm where the sleeves are attached. Place a couple of pins in your seam line, your new seam line, through all 4 layers to keep things from shifting. And then go back and either place a lot of pins on that seam line or on those stitches through all the layers, or you can weave long pins in and out of the line. Then flip the shirt over, and you have a very clear pin line, which is an exact copy of the first seam line. Just take your marking tool of choice and draw in the line. You can remove the pins and pin the layers of the left side only for sewing, so just the 2 layers of fabric on the left side. You can fill in the line between your marks, or you might even have to draw over it to see it better if you need to. Then take it to your machine and sew the new seam line. Because I took so much out here on the side of the shirt, I'm going to have to trim off the excess fabric. Then iron the seam open. Remove any chalk lines or other marks before ironing those so it isn't set into the shirt. Because even though this is the back side, it might show through to the front side, especially on light colored shirts. The shirt was constructed with serged or overcast seam allowances. If you have a serger, you can copy that, or you could zigzag over the edges, and the 2 edges could be together or separate. That's up to you. But this prevents the fabric from fraying. The shirt is done. It fits much better. It's still a little too wide above the chest because I only decreased the width below the chest. But overall, they definitely have a better fit. Well, I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, give it a like. I would really appreciate it. If you have any questions about this technique, please put in the comments below and I'll be sure to reply. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.